contribute to this is a conversation today, and also some thoughts on this subject. What does mindfulness have to do with empowerment? And also, what can mindfulness for people of color look like when it comes from a different sense of confidence and a different place of ownership of what we have to contribute to this movement, this mindfulness movement that, at least in the West, has been very marginalized in a white, college-educated, I would say, liberal demographic that misses a lot of what makes the culture of people of color and people of African descent so precious and so unique and deep. And so I am dedicated to discovering mindfulness in a different way. And my hope is also that this meeting, this gathering that that we're a part of right now for this weekend, actually will continue to unfold that. Yes, so maybe I'll ask you a short question. Are you now just joining this session and you haven't participated in all the other sessions, or have you been on all the sessions and this is kind of just the next stage of the event for you?
Are you asking all of us?
I'm asking some of you, whoever is willing to engage with me.
Okay, so I mean, let me just backtrack for a lot of the people who are joining now from around the world. So we had Dean give an overview of the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, and he also mentioned some training in the mindfulness-based interventions like MBSR and MBCT. We had one breakout room, and then we've had a 2-hour lunch break. And sorry, we had one mindfulness session with Kareem in the morning. So that's more or less the whole morning gone. It's already just past 3 o'clock. So we're entering now the second stage of this retreat, which I've entitled the Master's Tools. And so we have a break, and then we have Rhonda McGee, who will be presenting at 4 o'clock in less than an hour. So we will have another break now for you to practice. So that's what's been going on.
Good, okay, that's helpful. So can I see a show of hand who is a teacher of mindfulness? Okay, can I see a show of hand who's a spiritual teacher or a Buddhist teacher? Okay, good. And are there people here who are completely new to the practice of mindfulness and meditation? Okay, good. Okay, so what does mindfulness have to do with empowerment? Yeah, so I come from a Vajrayana background. We have spiritual traditions of empowerment. That is important because there is a rite of passage, you can say, that as a person who is wanting to come fully into your own, you have to go through. Now, we are all going through that in some way or another. Not everyone goes through that through a spiritual community. Some of us, we go through it as artists, or we go through it as parents, or we go through it as professionals. But many of us also, we never go through it. We never actually feel like we come fully into our own power. And so, in my opinion, and based on my experience, the relationship that we have with power, it works itself out either way, you know. And when we look at the racial tensions that we experience, at least in our society in North America, they're all about power. Maybe not all, but to a large degree, they are about power dynamics and use or misuse or abuse of power and power dynamics. And so what I want to encourage you as a student of mindfulness is to direct some of your mindfulness to your relationship with power, and to know that to complete a path of awakening that underlies many of these secular tools that we are using today, and that also is one of the applications of mindfulness in the world, means also to examine and to awaken the relationship you have with power. And there's a lot of different ideas that one can have about what power is and how power works. And I don't really want to tell you what that needs to be for you. But what I want to invite you to is to bring the relationship you have with power into your mindfulness practice. And to ask yourself, what is the relationship that you have with power and with the process of being empowered, whether that is being empowered by another person who wants to give you, who wants to share with you access and responsibility and opportunity and vision, but also the empowerment that you are giving yourself. To what degree are you giving yourself permission to expand your presence, yeah, to embody yourself and to expand your presence in your own life and in the life of the loved ones you share your life with? You know, how present are you with your children or your spouse, with your friends, and how present are you for yourself? And a lot of that has to do actually with the relationship that we have, the true relationship we have with power. Now, I want to treat power here initially as a spiritual force, meaning that it is something that is in the world already. It's already in the world when we get here. And we come in the world, all of us, we come naked, yeah, and we come having to learn a lot of things. We have to learn how to harness the energy and the forces and the rules and the laws that exist in this world. And one of these energies is this energy of power. And so when you're going through the classical training of mindfulness and meditation, which is about waking up, this relationship of power becomes quite important, because it is a transmission, you can say. Yeah, it's a transmission of a state where a person is free to express their best intentions and to express their qualities in service of certain principles that they want to live, or and that person is trying to teach to another person how to access their own wisdom, how to get in contact with their own qualities of wisdom and compassion, and start to express those in the world, so that when the first person, who is like an elder or a more experienced person, leaves this world, the other person can carry that forward, and then can also show up in a role of a leader, in a role of a teacher, in the role of a mentor, in the role of an elder, so that the living of that freedom and the living of these qualities does not disappear from the world, but actually continues from one generation to the next generation. And so this process of being empowered, allowing ourselves to be empowered, empowering ourselves in the context of mindfulness becomes very important. And it's also definitely part of the struggle that we have as people of colors, because we're not necessarily used to having power, or we are not used to, or we're not comfortable necessarily showing how much power we have or expressing our power in all kinds of contexts and situations. And and that expresses itself as well between genders, yeah? The gender dynamics, the patriarchy that we're in so many places in the world are living under, is also really confusing us in our understanding of how to properly express power. There's incredible work actually done on this by, God, what is the right use of power, I think it's called. There's a work that I would recommend you to look in further if that interests you, coming out of the mindfulness community. There is some great work done around that you can find. So when you look at, when you practice mindfulness and you practice the path of meditation, the key relationship that you are developing is not only the relationship with yourself, it's really the relationship with the present moment. This moment by moment experience. And we all live in a time when we struggle with distractions. There is a lot of distractions, particularly through now the incredible resources of technology that are available. And we know from research and science that people are distracted almost half the time. So this is called task unrelated thoughts, meaning that while we're doing one thing, our mind is preoccupied with something else, which creates a relationship with the present moment that is about 50-50, meaning 50% of the time we're actually in the present moment, and 50% of the time we're somewhere else. We're somewhere else mentally, and sometimes that place is a projection where we project ourselves into the future. We anticipate something either good to happen, in which case we get excited, or something bad to happen, which is more often the case, in which case we get anxious. But either way, that is one way we leave the present. The other way is that we dwell on the past. We get preoccupied with events that occurred that are not happening right now, but that occurred at some other time. Then we get distracted into analysis, into trying to understand what is happening to the point where we're not present. And we get distracted into labeling, judging, or narrating what is happening. Whereas when we are like a sports commentator and we are literally narrating our own experience, our life, our moment by moment life. So these are all different mental activities that are taking place that are interfering with our ability to be fully present. And I'm going to do a little bit, most of you are already teachers or you are practitioners, but I want to add a dimension to this that I think is really important to understand. So power is also about our ability to control something. Now, most of us, even though we know it's futile, we try to control things outside of our control. Yeah, we try to control things about our environment, about other people that we are in relationship with, about situations. And most of these efforts are accompanied by frustration and by struggle and by suffering, because that is not how control works, and because we in fact don't have the ability to manipulate or to control things that aren't actually controllable by us. We can temporarily manipulate them, but ultimately we fail at controlling things that are uncontrollable. And that is a big process, or an intense process of recognition, that we have to shift away from trying to control the uncontrollable to controlling the controllable, to actually exercising our power where it can be applied. Now, as a practitioner of mindfulness, you learn that you can apply your power to who you are and to what you do, being and doing. So with regard to who you are, you can narrow that pretty much down to 5 things. Yeah, you have well, let's just say with regard to maybe we'll start with there. With regard to what you do, you can narrow that down to 5 things. You do thoughts, so you can develop some control there, and you can decide the kind of thoughts that you choose to cultivate or that you choose to let pass through. Then you have your emotions, the attitudes and the feelings that you develop. Then you have what you imagine, your imagination, images you hold, pictures in the mind. Then you have what you say, the words you speak, and then you have the actions you take, what you actually do physically, what actions you engage in physically. And those 5 things that are the expression of what you bring into your life and what you share with others and how you show up in the world, either in the state you're in or with regard to the habits you cultivate, all of this, all of those things that you're able to generate a sense of control over are all happening in the present moment. Your thoughts are happening in the present moment. Your attitudes, they're present in this present moment. What you imagine is taking place in this present moment. What you say and what you do is taking place in this present moment. So if, in fact, your presence is reduced to 50% right off the bat because of distraction, then already your power and your ability to control your life and your destiny, and also your impact on your community and the people with whom you interact with, is cut in half. So from the very beginning, because of distraction, you're disempowered. Even if you were to harness the power you naturally have, by not being present, half of that power is already stripped away. Then that is the reason why for anyone who really wishes to transform the society or transform their relationships or transform themselves, mindfulness is the ground on which that has to happen. You have to make yourself present because everything happens in the present. Yeah. And when you understand that, it's not as easy as it sounds to actually transition, because we are so conditioned by our past experience, and we're so apprehensive of what could possibly happen in the future, and wanting to avoid bad things happening to us and wanting to make sure good things happen to us, that we are still, even with the best intentions, we are dealing with this mind that is not accustomed to being deeply settled in the present. So with regard to navigating our mind in relationship to the future, we have to learn how to relate to uncertainty. We have to learn to relate to not knowing what will happen. And that is a frontier that is discombobulating for us, that makes us oftentimes anxious. And the only way that we can navigate that frontier is by developing greater access to what we actually know to be true, and how can we act from what we know to be true, even though we can't predict all the possible outcomes that might come from that. And we have to learn how to cultivate trust. So this combination of having access to your inner knowing and the resources of your thoughts, your attitudes, your thinking, your imagination, what you say and what you do in the present moment, your ability to be aware of that, your ability to choose what you choose to express, what you choose not to express, and then your trust that out of that, good things will develop, even when you are not constantly projecting yourself into the future in order to avoid possible ramifications. That is one thing that is really important to develop if you want to deepen your mindfulness practice. Because otherwise, those 50% that you're just not there because you're projecting so much or you're so trapped in the past, they will not become available to you. So in the traditional spiritual teachings of Buddhism, for example, where a lot of mindfulness is taught, this element of the cultivation of deeper trust levels is actually a practice called refuge, taking refuge. And the key to that is that you learn how to choose to be in a state of deep trust. Now, everyone has their own way of relating to the ground of our experience. But what sometimes is overlooked when we teach mindfulness in a secular context is how do we help a person actually develop this deeper sense of trust, and how, rather than just helping them to focus, or rather than just helping them to pay attention, how do we help them deepen their sense of trust? Because that is part of why we are not present. So I'm mentioning that because it is also something that is often overlooked, and in many curricula on mindfulness, there isn't an emphasis on teaching either the students or also teaching other teachers how to develop and deepen this level of trust so that they can become more present. So this foundation of mindfulness and meditation, it gets you into the present moment. What does it have to do with empowerment? It has everything to do with it, because the power that you need to lead the life you want, and particularly the power that we need collectively to change systems, to really change systems, to not just reform but transform systems, requires great access to power. And it requires our ability to harness this power with integrity, and to be both powerful and in integrity. And so the access to the relationship to power also happens in the present moment, which means that if we want to change our relationship with power, we can never do that in the future. So our work as teachers of mindfulness, our work as practitioners of mindfulness, and our work as people of color who want to transform the reality for other people of color, and who are, I would even say, beyond committed, yeah, who are all in not retreating, not an inch from what we know will be the next phase of this evolution and transformation. It has to do with how we transform the present, moment by moment. It is not about creating a better future. It is about changing the present. Because creating the better future is where the collateral damage that we're currently actually facing as a species, whether that is environmentally or economically or society, civilly, the collateral damage that we are all trying to clean up is the damage that comes from trying to create a better future. Trying to create a better future has gotten us to the fallout environmentally, socially, politically, economically that we're dealing with. So what we need to focus on as mindfulness practitioners is actually, how do we steward, how do we take care of the present? How do we step into power and empowerment in the present? And how do we, by taking full ownership of that which we can control, bring about a different experience? First for yourself, first for ourselves, and then expanding from there. So I'm out of time for today. We have another session tomorrow. I think it's at 1:30. And we'll do some practices then, and also some practical exercises. And I have some questions prepared for you that will allow you to go deeper into examining your own relationship with power, the relationship that existed in your family around power, that relationship that exists maybe in your spiritual tradition around power, and how that intersects with your relationship with mindfulness and what you want to do as a teacher or as a practitioner or as an activist. We'll explore some of that in the session tomorrow.
You've given us so much food for thought in your presentation. Thank you so much, Dawa, for that. And I'm looking forward to more conversations. And what I'm taking from that is really how power is sitting with me in mindfulness, and how some of the mindfulness-based interventions really aren't really culturally attuned to the people of color, to what we're going through, and how to really ground ourselves in so many dynamics that are taking place. I think, as Alex said, it's not anchoring me enough to actually deal with some of the trauma, some of the PhDs. I feel anyway. I don't know how other people feel, but perhaps these are questions we can discuss in our breakouts. Anyone has a quick one? Let's take 2 quick questions before our break. Please just put your hand up. Tracy, Dr. Tracy, please go ahead.
Thank you for this powerful session, but I have a question around trauma, and especially collective historical and individual trauma, and that I feel as a blocker to folks, in addition to the 50% that you are not there, but I would add more to that and reduce the amount of being present. So could you just talk a little about how do you help folks also have to recognize the historical trauma, because the pain you see spilling into the streets is a part of that, the ability to get to the power. So if you could just sort of walk me through that.
Yes, yes. And so trauma is a prevalent experience. It's very prevalent among marginalized people, but it's also very prevalent in a militarized society like the one in the United States, or in any colonialized society, just simply because of the harm inflicted and the harm received. So trauma is rising to the surface in the mindfulness practice community, because it is recognized as something that is keeping us from being present. The trauma that we have and that we are ill-equipped to bring onto the path is a form of, it forces us to avoid being present. So it pushes us out of our bodies, it pushes us out of our emotions, and then it breaks through in some kind of usually overreaction to situations. Yeah. So as a traumatized person, we get triggered, and when we act from trigger, we're not in touch with the resources necessarily of wisdom, the resources of compassion or skillful communication. We are in a survival state when we are triggered. So it's really important as a person practicing mindfulness to look at the work with trauma as a big part of what is necessary if you want to take your practice deeper, or if you want to assist others to progress with this tool. So the inclusion of trauma skills, you can say, or trauma interventions in mindfulness teacher education is becoming more and more important. With regard to how to work with trauma, the most important thing that I have found initially is to come to a point of getting over the shame, let's say, of having been traumatized, and to be able to be really honest and to be in a community where people are not denying the presence of trauma in each other, or making it somehow shameful to have trauma. So the only way you can come out of it, in my experience, part of it is through the body, which is somatic work, And part of it is through finding the voice of the traumatized individual within yourself, so that the emotional experience, first of all, can be validated. And you can actually give voice to what happened and what occurred and what the experience was. Now, the good news about trauma is that we can heal from it. It is literally possible to de-traumatize ourselves. So I hope that answers your question to some extent. The way that we are, I think that trauma, to de-traumatize yourself requires trust, and it requires patience, it requires compassion, being in the presence of others with compassion, and being in the presence of your own compassion. And it requires being in the presence of humility, being in the presence of people who don't have the need to know all the answers before they engage in the process of healing. And so I think as a community, we have to also generate those spaces, and we have to generate our ability to hold that space for ourselves, and also our ability and willingness to hold that space for others. It's a short answer for a very deep question. What I can tell you is that
Thank you, Dawa.
a lot of teachers still are traumatized. And so also it's important to have realistic expectations. Even teachers are still doing the work of healing their own trauma. So it is really something we're in together, but I think it has begun, and I think we'll continue, and I think we're going to be unstoppable. But it requires this gentleness and spaces free of shame.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dawa, for everything that you brought today. I'm looking forward to hearing from you tomorrow. So I've just spoken to Rhonda, and she is on her way. She will be here in 20 minutes. So I just wanted people to have a break now for 20 minutes. We've gone over time for 10 minutes already. So thank you, everyone. And please don't log off. Just leave everything in place. If you haven't put your number in your room, then please do so. And thank you. See you in 20 minutes.
Can I ask one thing for the break, William? Yes. In the break, if you are connecting with another person, maybe share one or two things that you took away from this conversation, because I think it'll help anchor your own insight, Okay, right. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.